Hello, this will be a Warframe tier list, I guess. Not really with tiers, I'm just going to be saying how good or bad a weapon is, in my opinion. This will be all weapons I've ever owned. This will count Incarnons, adversaries, every single weapon type. I'll say how to get most of these. Not, and yeah, I might do companions, but this will start off with the Warframes and end with the melee weapons. Hopefully you enjoy the rest of this. So we will be starting off with Ash for our Warframes. His first ability increases damage and duration of slash effects. His second ability throws out a shuriken that does 300 slash damage, is moddable. Smokescreen lets him turn invisible and lets basically just that. His third ability lets you teleport to an enemy, doing a finisher, and you do get 50% energy back. Fourth ability is his exalted weapon. I don't know much about it. All I know is that you make clones and then you just attack. He is definitely not the best Warframe, but he is decent. He is acquired from Railjack. I don't know what you do in Railjack for him. Next is Atlas. His passive has two passives. So his first passive is, while he's on the ground, he cannot be knocked down. Second passive is, well, he can get up to 1,500 rubble. His abilities create rubble, I guess, and you collect that to get extra armor. Landslide is basically his exalted weapon. Bunch a lot of enemies, you get increased damage, and that's mainly it. Tectonics. You build the wall and you can turn it into a boulder. It does an explosion effect after it hits an enemy. Petrified turns all enemies to stone, and they drop rubble. They cannot move, but they do heal your rumblers, partially. So rumblers are these guys that fight for you, and they do a decent bit of damage, but when they die, they drop a rumble. Next up on the list will be Caliban. So he's a decent Warframe, I guess. So his passive makes it so allies near you and yourself. If you got hit by slash like 5 times, it'd increase your resistance to it. First ability, just spin around doing status, and you gain energy back for each shot. Enemy hit. Sentient Wrath, they take extra damage, and you lift them up in the air. Third ability, you just summon ranged guys, portal guys, or melee guys. Fourth ability, if you have one of the melee sentinels, they will also shoot the lasers. Caliban's not that great. His passive makes it so whenever you get a weak point kill, increases weak point critical chance. Seek, you place on a pillar and marks all enemy weak points, and you do extra damage to weak points. Resupply, you can choose any element to put your next reload into. Evade, you go invisible, and killing enemies in their weak points extends the duration. And his fourth ability is his Exalted Sniper. You can either choose to shoot out an ice grenade, or just... So if you hit an enemy in their weak points, it will rebound to other enemies in the area. Equinox is passive turns health orbs into energy orbs and energy orb into health. First ability lets you change from night and day. Second ability lets you make enemies take more damage, or makes them all go to sleep. Makes your allies do more damage, or makes your enemies not do as much damage. Mend heals allies, and maim does slash to all enemies. Next up is the Excaliburs. Primary is you attack 10 times faster and do 10% more damage while wielding a sword. Slash dash is just you hit all enemies nearby with basically your exalted. Second ability blinds all enemies. I believe that's all it does. Radial Javelin, just it stabs javelins into all enemies in a decent radius. Exalted Blade is your melee, exalted, and so it shoots out a projectile every time you swing. Excalibur's a beginner frame, so he's not great. Gauss's passive is basically he has a battery, and the higher it gets, the faster he regenerates shields. His Mach Rush lets him run. If he bumps into a wall, it does a shockwave, and increases his battery. Second ability uses battery, but whenever you get hit, it also uses battery, but it lets you be resistant to most damage. Third ability summons an ice or heat area. If you choose an ice area, you gain battery. If you choose heat, you lose battery. Fourth ability increases your battery percentage, letting you supercharge it, and it increases your fire rate, reload speed, casting speed, and attack speed. And it also just shoots out bolts of heat, I believe. Okay. Next up is Hera. Overshield capacity doubled. Start missions with maximum. Cast a wave of energy. So, his first ability. You throw out chains and all enemies affected stop in their tracks and gives you shields. Penance gets rid of all your shields, increases your fire rate, and lets you heal shields with enemy kill. Your third ability makes you spend energy to give you an energy buff, that every single time you kill an enemy with a regular shot, you get shield energy, and when you get a headshot kill, increases doubles the amount of energy. Covenant basically makes it so you and your allies become invincible, and each time you guys are hit, increases a critical chance modifier. And finally, we've reached Kome. Her passive is she'll choose a random weapon, and they'll get a random statuses. First ability shoots out threads that inflict status every single time an enemy touches them. Second ability lets you grab a decree. So if you roll triple sixes, which is her second passive, Omakuji you don't have to do a challenge for. You get for however you're meant to say her first ability. It makes all threads do all elements. Third ability makes it so you're invincible if you get triple sixes, or just makes you have damage reduction. Fourth ability, you put all enemies on strings, and they passively get status. Not great, not. Next up is one of my favorites, Kullervo. So his passive makes it so you can attack faster with heavies attacks and makes them cheaper to do. His second passive, which doesn't really tell you, is all of his abilities increase your melee combo counter. He is a melee focused frame. Your first ability, if you tap it, lets you teleport to an enemy. If you hold it, it teleports to any marked location of your choice. It increases your melee critical chance, and it is on a duration. Your second ability, you throw out all of Kullervo's knives around you. Each enemy you hit gives you overguard. Any knives that don't hit an enemy go back to you and make you take damage. Also, another thing, Kullervo only has health, which I think is decently important. Collective Curse, also known as one of his better abilities, So each enemy hit by a collective curse takes the same damage. So if you hit one enemy, they're all getting the same. Storm of Uko makes an area of effect where it rains down knives. All enemies will get slash procs when they are hit. And Lavos is our next frame. So whenever he gets energy or universal orbs, it gives him status immunity, and he can hold his abilities to imbue his next ability with any element. So Amphibian Bite makes you heal, and it deals poison, and if you hold it down, it'll let you do poison on your next attack. You can combine the elements these do. Barrel Rush, you dash forward, releasing bottles, I guess, each doing cold status. You can hold this ability down to give your next ability cold. Transmutation Probe. It launches a probe that turns all health orbs and energy orbs to universal orbs. And it does electricity damage, and also, so Lavos only uses cooldowns instead of energy. And his third ability, Transmutation Probe, lowers all cooldowns by 1.5 seconds. And then you can hold it to do electricity. Catalyze, you throw out mini pizza cutters that release heat to all enemies in the area. If you hold it down, it lets it do heat, and it does more damage for each status effect affecting enemies. Next up is Limbo. So his first ability, whenever you roll, you enter the alternate dimension. You lead by a rift that your teammates can enter. It only lasts for 5 seconds, and you regenerate energy in the rift, and each enemy killed there also gives 10 energy. First ability banishes enemies to the rift. Second ability freezes all enemies in the rift, and it also stops all projectiles in the air. And it also resumes after the timer. Rift Surge. It surges nearby enemies in the rift. When they are defeated, it is transferred to enemies outside the rift. Surged enemies that leave the rift. And enemies that leave the rift or die, banish all enemies near them. Cataclysm. And it does damage over time, I'm assuming, and explodes after it's done. I believe they take more damage while they're in Cataclysm. Loki. He basically has no passive. Decoy. You create the hologram of yourself. All enemies will be focused on it. Invisibility makes you invisible. Switch Teleport lets you teleport with anything, so if you're looking at an enemy, you and that enemy will swap places, and it'll confuse said enemy. Fourth ability, Radial Disarm. You shoot out a wave of energy that makes all enemies have to go to their melee. It will not work on the melee attackers. Next is Mag, one of the beginner frames. It makes all items gravitate towards Mag. Pull lets you pull in all enemies to you. Magnetize makes a bubble around enemies. You can shoot the bubble, and they'll constantly get hit by that bullet. Polarize armor strips all enemies, and I believe inflicts slash procs if you grab the little orbs on the ground. And then fourth ability does just a large wave of damage to all enemies nearby. Necros. First ability, you restore health for each dead enemy nearby you. Soul Punch. So if you defeat an enemy, you can turn said enemy into like a spirit that will fight for you. Terrify makes all enemies run away and armor strips. Their ability makes all items drop a second time. Well, not all items, but I'll re-roll the tables. And then Shadows of the Dead makes all dead corpses near you reanimate and turn into shadows to fight for you. Next up is Nidus. His passive is he has mutation stacks. If he dies with 15, he revives. His first ability, release a carpet of something. Each enemy you hit gives 1/5 of a mutation stack. Larva makes all enemies nearby. Each enemy that is killed in the larva gives 1/5 of a mutation stack. Parasitic Link links you to an ally or enemy. When linked to an enemy, you gain armor. When linked to an ally, you guys can get increased ability strength. Fourth ability summons an area of effect, summoning mites, and also gives you healing. Next, it gets 40% critical chance per confused enemy in affinity range, up to 200%. Mind control, it lets you control an enemy, and it makes the enemy get increased radiation status chance when they are shot. They also have increased damage multiplier. Psychic bolts, that releases bolts that track enemies, and when enemies are defeated, it adds additional bolts to hit new targets. And attacking foes that are affected by psychic bolts do more damage and transfers a portion of the health to you. Chaos makes it so all enemies attack each other, basically like a radiation effect, and confusing them. Your fourth ability lets you move around in a bubble, and each time you're shot increases the damage when the bubble explodes. Next up is Corvex. His passive is all weapons get punched through. His first ability summons a pillar that releases radiation to all enemies in the area. Containment wall basically slams two walls together, making all enemies go in a line. If you hit a pillar, makes Charinka pillars shoot faster. Your third ability gives out these little shields that make you resist status effects. And then Crucible Blast. You basically get immunity frames as you're doing it. And enemies you hit with it start exploding to other enemies. And it constantly does that as a chain reaction. And if you hit a Charinka pillar, it makes the pillar get that stat effect, where it makes all enemies explode. Next up, we got the most overused frame, Revenant. So, shield depletion does 100 damage to all enemies. Thrall basically lets you take control of enemies and makes them fight for you. If you kill mind-controlled enemies, they turn into a pillar of energy, I guess, and it lets you control other enemies. Mesmer Skin lets you make these little mark effects that make you invincible. Every single time you get shot by a different enemy, you lose an effect. Mesmer Skin. Reeve makes it so you get shields and health from enemies. You get more shields and health from enthralled enemies. Your fourth ability makes you spin around, doing damage to each enemy. They'll do their weakest status, so if an enemy is weak to slash, it'll do slash damage. Next up is Sevagoth. So his passive is whenever he dies, he's resurrect as a shadow, and you have to fight enemies. To resurrect, Reap summons his shadow, and so all enemies that are killed fill up his death well, which is his other passive, which lets you use his fourth ability. So, it puts death seeds in enemies, and whenever you use your first ability, it explodes said enemies who are been sown, and it just fills up the death well. Your third ability, Gloom, summons a pulse that slows enemies and heals you slowly. And allies in the wave will also steal health with each attack. Fourth ability uses the well, and it just transforms you into the Exalted Shadow. It has its own set of moves, so it has melee focus build. Next up is Styanax. His passive does extra critical chance with shields and doubles for spear guns. So your first ability throws Javelin that when it hits an enemy, makes a area that it pulls in all other enemies. There's a shield, summons shields, it summons projectiles that go in front, and it reduces enemy shields and regenerates health for each enemy struck. Third ability makes all enemies targets Dianax, and it regenerates your squad's energy over time. It also increases shields gain for each kill your teammates get or you get. Final Stand makes you just throw a lot of spears at enemies, doing decently high damage, and it does explosions wherever they land. It also does more damage if you hit enemies directly. Next up is Temple, one of the newer frames. Passive basically makes a metronome, and you must time it in the box to make all your abilities do an extra effect and be cheaper. Your first ability summons fire pillars of heat, and if you time it correctly, it fills up your bar. So your metronome bar fills up orange whenever you time it, so you can use your fourth ability, and it also summons more pillars. Your second ability shoots out a wave of heat that increase enemies' likelihood of getting hit by critical chance or critical strikes. And if you time it correctly, it doubles the critical chance and fills up the bar. Third ability makes all weapons that you and your allies control gain heat. If you time it perfectly, it makes you invulnerable for longer and fills up the bar. Your fourth ability uses your bar as its energy source, and it just is basically a flamethrower. While you're aiming, you can make it shoot different elements. So basically law. Next up is Vauban. Its passive does 25 damage to incapacitated enemies or enemies that can't attack. Your first ability summons drones that roll around and attack enemies. Now, your second ability, there's Tether Coil, which makes all enemies flail in one area. Your Mine Layer, then your other version, basically just shoots out tons of bullets in random directions hitting enemies. Your third one makes it a speed pad, where you get extra speed if you touch it. Your fourth ability increases all your teammates' damage. Your third ability sends out basically a homing missile wherever you aim, and your fourth ability makes all enemies fly up in the air, gets rid of their armor, or you can hold it and make all enemies go in one spot, and it also makes them incapacitated, letting you do more damage. Next up is Volt. Its passive is, while you're running on the ground, it builds up to 1,000 extra electricity damage on your next attack as you're moving on the ground. First ability sends out a shock that affects all enemies in an area if they're close together. Your second ability gives you and your teammates a speed buff. Your third ability places down a shield, and it does extra damage to enemies if you shoot with your weapons. Discharge does an area of effect electricity shock that if enemies are nearby, they will slowly electric shock each up. Step is Zaku. Passive is 25% damage reduction on AoE attacks and chance to avoid incoming weapon attacks from enemies. The first ability makes all your weapons do extra damage with Void. Your second ability lets you steal all enemy weapons near you, and those weapons will float by you and shoot other enemies. The Lost gives you 3 abilities. Your first version of it makes a circle where all enemies in that circle become allies. Your second one makes it so you can put an enemy in a void catalyst thing, and all enemies near it will get that armor stripped. And then the third one is basically a laser that lifts all enemies in the air. I think it does extra damage if you shoot them. The Vest on Time stops all cooldowns, since most of these abilities are on cooldowns for how long they last. It pauses all durations, makes Zaku 75% harder to hit, but does slow down, does increase their speed. Zephyr is extra critical chance while in the air. First ability lets you fly up in the air or in whatever direction you want. If you hold it, you just float. Second ability, if you tap it, makes all enemies go in one area. If you hold it, it sends all of them flying away. Turbulence makes it so enemy shots will not hit you and redirect at random directions, possibly hitting enemies. Tornado, if you tap it, summons 3 tornadoes that run around. But if you hold it, they all stay in position. All enemies in the tornado, so if you shoot the tornado, it will affect all enemies in any tornado. Last but not least, for Warframes, we have Varun. First ability is that you can hold abilities to get special effects. For your first ability, makes you invisible and makes you faster, do extra damage chance, status chance, inflicts melee. I'm at slash to all attack for one attack, and if you kill an enemy during this time, it extends the melee buff. If you hold it, you increase parkour velocity. So if you tap your second ability, you give an enemy 5 random status effects fully maxed out, up to 10 stacks. On their death, they spread status effects to other enemies. If you hold it, increase status effect resistance. If you tap like it's on, enemies killed by melee attacks drop health orbs, and enemies killed by headshots drop energy orbs. You can increase the duration of this by killing enemies affected by 5 or more status effects. If you hold it, it increases your melee attack efficiency. All friends descent, you drop down and you do 5 brutal lunges, which do an area of effect. So you jump at an enemy, does a little explosion near that enemy, nearby enemies get damaged. If you hold down this ability, if you were to die while this is hold it down, you don't have to hold it down the whole time. We'll say that you chose this wolf. If you hold it down, you basically get a second life.